So I'm very excited to share with you To Love is to Act and to talk with you about it. So that's half the reason I write books anyway, is to be able to talk to people about the ideas in the books. During the talk, feel free to use the chat button if you like. It's under the participants icon, and I'll take a look at those during or after for sure. You know, it's pretty amazing that I came to write this book. As a professor type, I found it very hard to believe that anyone could possibly make a musical out of Victor Hugo's incredibly epic novel. And I found it very hard to understand why Les Mis has been so popular and so long-lived. It's in its 35th year right now. If it weren't for the pandemic, it would have been nonstop for 35 years. And so I avoided Les Mis. I didn't understand why my intelligent mother loved it so much. I avoided it until she asked me to watch like one of the concert versions on DVD with her right here in this very room where I am. And I was going along, and when we got to the song Master of the House, I was captivated by that. And that opened me up to the rest of the show. I became an unapologetic Les Mis fan, fascinated by the music, by the musical, by how it connected to Hugo's novel. And then after I began teaching Hugo's novel at University of Virginia, I appreciated even better how the musical captures the heart of the novel. So the more I taught Hugo's epic, the more I talked with other Les Mis fans, the more I heard that people say they felt uplifted by this show. The musical or the novel touches them very deeply. In fact, in some cases, changes their lives. For instance, when I talked with Hugh Jackman about the experience of playing Jean Valjean in the Tom Hooper's 2012 film, he told me about a man he called his mentor, Tim Costello. Costello, Jackman said, was so inspired by Hugo's Bishop Myriel that he not only became a minister, but also what Jackman calls Australia's moral mouthpiece. Or Jackman himself, who emailed me after the movie came out, emailed me that playing Valjean had changed him, had made him, quote, want to be a better man every day. So I launched myself on the adventure of investigating the power of Les Misérables. I wanted to share my thoughts with Les Mis fans, and then the more I got into Hugo's ideas and his life, the more I wanted to share my ideas with people who think about how to lead their best possible life. A life of love and conscience. Victor Hugo spent a lot of time thinking about how to live such a life. The last words he wrote, just 3 days before he died, were, "To love is to act. Aimer, c'est agir." And here's the note, with pretty good handwriting while being ill and on his way out, I'm afraid. When you care about something, you need to do something about it. Obviously, that's where the book's title comes from. I'd like to give you a sense of what To Love is about, what To Love is to Act is about, to read you a little bit from it and to show you some of the illustrations. And I look forward to your questions and comments afterwards. I seem to be one of those writers who likes to talk about what I'm working on, probably too much. That can be unfortunate sometimes to the people around me, but it can bring some very good things. I was rambling on about my book project in Paris with some very good friends who'd invited us for dinner, and they stunned me by saying, "Oh, that's a coincidence. Hugh Jackman is very good friends with one of our best friends." So near and yet so far. That's what I thought. But these are very good friends indeed. About a week later, I opened my email and found a message that started, "Hi, Marva, Hugh Jackman here. I hope you don't mind me bothering you." I said, "No, I don't mind. It's okay. You can bother me." You can imagine my reaction. So Hugh Jackman at that point was in the process of beginning to film Les Misérables, and it would be 7 months before we finally got a chance to talk. When we did, he gave me intriguing insights, both from his study of Hugo's novel, and he read it twice, once very scientifically to break it down, he said, and once just to enjoy, and from what he learned from trying to get inside Jean Valjean's skin. He also put me in touch with some of the other creative artists involved with Les Mis. Their ideas enriched To Love is to Act So I'd like to read you a bit from the introduction of my book to introduce you to them and some of their ideas. Les Mis expresses the heart of Les Misérables because these artists kept Hugo's novel central to their adaptations. For instance, while he was at UVA for an artistic residency, Les Mis creator Alain Boublil told me, honestly, the book has been the source. The book has been the key. The book has been everything. His colleague, composer Claude Michel Schoenberg, focused more on the author himself as we sat in his London garden. He said that he found Hugo to be a universal mind with a very modern process of thought. These two musical geniuses deeply respect Hugo's work, as does director Tom Hooper. Les Misérables was my Bible when I made the film, he told me. When you read the novel, well, Hugo is such a clear storyteller. Every single thing is mapped out. I felt like this is a storyteller who wants you to follow him completely. So I wanted to honor that and use him to help me guide the audience with the story. Like Hooper, actor-singer Colm Wilkinson, the original Jean Valjean, called the novel my Bible, telling me that he had kept the Norman Denny translation in his dressing room. In between shows, or even during a show, I'd just get into a page and read it, and it would bring me back to the piece again. Wilkinson found Hugo's work so potent that as he sang Valjean's words with emotional impact, he found that he was, as he told me, actually speaking the novel to a certain degree. Over 25 years later, Hugh Jackman similarly found the novel crucial. He said, obviously, for an actor, Hugo's work is unbelievable. It's about the best bit of background preparation you can do. I read Les Misérables twice, the first time very scientifically and breaking everything down and writing notes. Then I read it again before we started to film, just reading it to enjoy it, really. These artists appreciate the detail and realism of Hugo's characters and settings, but Hugo aimed to write something more, a story that would resonate around the world, as he wrote to his Italian publisher. Here's a quote from Hugo from that letter. You're right, sir, when you say that Les Misérables is written for all peoples. I don't know whether it will be read by everyone, but it is meant for everyone. The wounds of the human race, these large wounds that cover the globe, they don't stop at blue or red lines on the world's map. Wherever men live in ignorance or despair, wherever women sell themselves for bread, wherever children lack a book to learn from or a hearth to warm them, Les Misérables knocks at the door and says, open up, I am here for you. Producer Cameron McIntosh attributes some of the success of Les Mis to that very universality, as he told me. The genius of Hugo's characters is that they exist everywhere and always. It has nothing to do with 19th century France. It has everything to do with humanity. Of course, I'm very grateful to these artists for talking to me. But mostly I want to thank the friends who shared their writing expertise, lent me photos, and offered much needed support. Forgive me if I've forgotten someone, but beyond my students and my Hugo Scholar friends, these folks come immediately to mind. Andy Kaufman, Mary Esselman, LaVey Hoffman, Alain Lecomte, Janet Horn, Deborah Murray, Judith Reagan, Richard Warner, Elsa Pereira, Emily Swallow, Steve Arata, Claire Cronmiller, Marianne Leeper, Rick Skinner, Suman Venkatesh, and Jean-Baptiste Hugo. Thank you all very much. Some of you are here. A special thanks to my husband, John Galat, who puts up with Victor Hugo sharing our home and not helping with much needed renovations. And to my friend, Bob Cook, who intelligently, patiently read draft after draft, one might say, after draft, and translated Hugo's words, apparently not ad nauseum, though I'm surprised at that. And thank you to my wonderfully supportive and knowledgeable editor, David Rade of Swan Isle Press. The more I explored, the more impressed I became with Hugo's humanity, his sensitivity to human foibles and the challenges we face, and his optimism about our potential, despite his many sad life events. To give you a very quick summary, Victor's incompatible parents lived apart and then divorced when he was still young. His brother and then his younger daughter had major mental breakdowns. His wife had a love affair with his best friend. His daughter Leopoldine drowned at age 19. Hugo's affair with a married woman brought them both public shame. Hugo spent 19 years in political exile. He lived through 2 revolutions and the deadly famine during the Prussian siege of Paris. And in the end, most of his children, his wife, and his friend, lover, and muse of 50 years all died before he did. Out of those challenges, some of them as tough as those he recounts in Les Misérables, Hugo developed his guiding principles. They resonate with our lives today and drive most of my essays into Love is to Act. To give you an overview, here are some of the chapter titles and opening illustrations. Hugo advocated really seeing other people. This is the original first edition illustration of Jean Valjean right after he was released from prison, when the only person who could see him as a person was the bishop. Hugo believed that if we really see others and pay attention, then we will allow love to grow and put that love into action. When Hugo published Les Misérables, he and his family began offering weekly free lunches to poor Guernsey children, any they could find. This is a photo of one of those lunches with Hugo in the back, in the taller man in the white hat. Acting from that place of love, we can do a lot. We can forgive. The famous scene from the Tom Hooper's movie where Jean Valjean, played by Hugh Jackman, receives the candlesticks from the bishop. We can follow our consciences. Hugo drew this picture of what he called conscience in the face of a bad action. We can do what's morally right, not just what's legal. This is a scene from the confrontation song from the original Broadway production between Inspector Javert and Jean Valjean, played here by Colm Wilkinson. We can open ourselves to positive change. Here's the encounter that galvanizes Valjean's redemption after he met the bishop. And in the end, like Hugo under siege by the French Empire, and like young Gavroche in Les Misérables, we can find the strength to carry on. This is one of Hugo's several drawings of Gavroche. How does all this come together in my book? First, to figure out what underpinned Hugo's principles, I looked into his lifelong search to understand who or what is beyond us. Never baptized as a Catholic in a majority Catholic country, and never a regular churchgoer, Hugo nonetheless sought ever closer contact with what he often called the universal spirit. Hugo did incorporate into Les Misérables the Christian ethos of his culture, but at the same time, he brilliantly wove into his novel his personal sense of an unknowable divine being who permeates the universe, a being who constitutes our conscience and our capacity to love. Tom Hooper recognized the breadth of Hugo's vision, telling me that he wanted to make Les Mis in what he called an inclusive way. He said, "The first time I saw the musical, thinking that I might make a film of it, I noticed that last line, 'To love another person is to see the face of God.' And I thought, my job as director is to make that line belong to everyone and not make people who are not Christian or not Catholic feel excluded. And I think I kind of achieved it with Hugh's help." Hugh Jackman talked with me about how he sees Les Misérables as a human story. It speaks to the heart of the trials and tribulations of being human and to the ideals that we should be striving for. I believe that at the heart of all the world's religions any kind of Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever. There's this sense of devotion to something greater than our separate self, something that connects all of us. And that's what Les Misérables is speaking to. Into Love is to Act, I delve into several influences on Hugo's spirituality, such as his interest in world religions, especially Hinduism and Buddhism. And with his family, Hugo experimented with seances for a couple of years, which is absolutely fascinating. But I was particularly intrigued by how Hugo's curiosity flourished during his exile in the Channel Islands, where he was virtually surrounded by the sea. Hugo often painted or drew the sea, as in this pen and ink wash that he entitled very descriptively, the end of the temporary breakwater on Guernsey, as seen from my lookout. The lookout is the room that Hugo designed on the top floor of his Guernsey home called Hauteville House. And here you have, it's one of my favorite places in the world to be. Here, one of my photos of it before the house was renovated. It's much brighter now and very much like it was when Hugo lived there. From this room, Hugo finished Les Misérables looking out on the sea. Hugo also explicitly associated the ocean with his writing, as in this journal entry that I'd like to read you because I love it so much. He wrote, I live in a splendid solitude, as though I were perched on a rock peak, with all the waves vast foam, and all the skies great clouds under my window. I live in this immense dream of the ocean. I'm becoming little by little a sleepwalker of the sea. From time to time, I awaken from this eternal contemplation to write. There's always on my stanza or on my page a little of the cloud's shadow and the sea's saliva. My thoughts come and go as though loosed by this giant swaying of the infinite. What doesn't float, what doesn't vacillate, is the soul face to face with eternity. It is conscience face to face with truth. Conscience face to face with truth, a key concept for Victor Hugo. For him, conscience connects us with the divine, and together with love for other people, points to how we should live. So I'd like to read you an excerpt from my chapter 6, Listening to Our Best Selves. And I'd like to share with you first the epigraph, because I love the way Hugo, who's always a poet, even when he's writing prose, I love the way he expresses this divine connection. Conscience is the internal moral solar spectrum. Sun lights the body, God lights the mind. It's as though a sort of God's moon exists deep in every human brain. This chapter begins with a scene from Hugo's life. Victor Hugo must have felt at the top of his game as he headed home after a scintillating dinner party with good friends. After all, only 2 days earlier, he'd been elected to the prestigious French Academy, a goal he had sought for 5 years. Now he was one of the 40 members of the national body overseeing the French language, one of what was called the Immortals. That election added to the fame he already had as the acknowledged leader of French Romanticism, a successful playwright and much published poet who would soon be called Le Maître, the master. Academy members could also run for political office, and Hugo had political ambitions. Proud of his hard-won reputation, he had reasons to protect it. So it's no surprise that he found himself wrangling with his conscience when he encountered an ethical dilemma. Because heavy snow had made walking home in his fancy shoes a bad idea, Hugo was looking to hire a carriage when a violent scene erupted. He saw an expensively dressed man plunge a giant fistful of snow down the back of a woman standing on the corner in a low-cut gown. She was most certainly a prostitute, just as Hugo's Fantine does when similarly attacked in Les Misérables. The woman let out a piercing scream and struck the man, who hit her back. The ensuing fight brought the police running. As Hugo reported, they seized the woman and didn't touch the man. At first, Hugo did not intervene. Even though he's sometimes associated with prostitutes, we know that from his writing notes and his journals, it would not be seen, it wasn't a done thing to be seen with one. Hugo joined the crowd following the officers and their suspect to the station. Then, like the onlookers whom he disparages in his novel, Hugo watched the proceedings through the window. The two sergeants, who were unknowingly serving as models for Inspector Javert, ignored the woman's protestations of innocence, her grief, and her accusations against the man who had attacked her. Hugo later reported to his wife that he had hesitated to enter the police station, recounting to himself all the reasons why he shouldn't. He was well known, and the newspapers were full of stories of his election to the academy. Let reporters know that he was mixed up in this sordid affair and he would be getting the wrong kind of publicity. No need to give fodder to other writers who already resented his success either. When the police promised the woman 6 months in prison, she sobbed, threw herself on the floor, and tore at her hair. Hugo, overtaken by compassion, reflected on the situation and decided to listen to his conscience. Walking into the station, he told the police that he had witnessed the scene and wanted to testify on the prostitute's behalf. But oral testimony wasn't enough. Because the police had begun their report, the commissioner said, he could release the woman only if Hugo signed a statement. To save an innocent person, Hugo agreed to sign. He knew that committing himself to getting truly involved was the right thing to do. As many of you know, of all the Les Misérables characters, Jean Valjean is the one most aware of his conscience. Hugo takes us inside the conflict between Valjean's desires and the dictates of his conscience, not once, but half a dozen times. From his riveting examination of Valjean's agony about whether to return to perpetual hard labor in order to save the man who's being condemned in his place, right up to the end of the novel where it's even worse, but I won't spoil it for you if the pleasure of reading the novel still awaits you. In chapter 6, we not only explore Valjean's strikingly human struggles with his conscience, I also recount some of Hugo's personal moments of crisis and how he deliberately chose the conscientious path. For example, Hugo risked imprisonment or execution or exile, which is what happened, to resist the coup d'etat that dissolved the Second French Republic. After 8 years in exile, Hugo rejected the general amnesty, choosing exile for an extra 11 years. As he famously said, I refuse to return to France until liberty returns. In his 60s, Hugo so tenaciously fought for forgiveness and clemency that he risked his own safety to offer asylum to fleeing communal revolutionaries. Hugo was proud to say, obeying my conscience is my rule, a rule with no exceptions. Hugo is, of course, not the only person to feel that way. In writing this book, I loved seeing how modern activists' ideas and choices reflect or parallel Hugo's actions and his ideas in Les Misérables, sometimes in remarkable ways. On the issue of conscience, South African President Nelson Mandela came to mind. I was intrigued to discover that, like Hugo, Mandela wrote about how laws can conflict with what's morally right. For instance, after Bertrand Russell was imprisoned for protesting Britain's nuclear weapons, Mandela wrote, I would say that the whole life of any thinking African in this country drives him continuously to a conflict between his conscience on the one hand and the law on the other. This is not a conflict peculiar to this country. the conflict arises for conscience, for men who think and feel deeply in every country. Today, we face this moral versus legal question in many situations, such as, I would say, disputes over immigration, the disproportionately high rate of incarceration and convictions for Black Americans, and the death penalty, to name just a few of our current dilemmas. As I explain in To Love is to Act, I was struck too by how powerfully Brian Stevenson makes a similar case for paying attention to what's right and to how we must see people's humanity in his book, now the movie, called Just Mercy. Still, where do conscience and altruistic love fit in our world of selfies, self-awareness, and exhortations to self-reliance? Les Misérables shows us. As Tom Hooper told me, Hugo celebrates people who are devoted to the self-interest of others. And yes, Hugo applauds those who show such generous love. Bishop Myriel, Jean Valjean, Fantine, Éponine, Gavroche, the Barricade Boys, and others. And he does so without cringing from the tortuous realities of conscience. Yet, as Hooper's comment implies, issues of conscience don't need to be these huge issues such as questions of social inequities, apartheid, or the life and death decisions that Valjean faced. Conscience is equally crucial in our everyday decisions. Certainly it is central to our moral character. Even if we don't pay attention to conscience, Hugo remarks near the end of his novel, quote, "We are never done with it, since conscience is bottomless, being God." But for Hugo, God is love too. As he concluded in his book-length poem called simply God, God has only one face, light, and only one name, love. His younger daughter, Adele, gives us a little bit more insight in her comment that she wrote in her journal after her father read that poem to friends and family one evening. Adele wrote, "My father arrives finally at his own religion, which is summarized in this great word, love." The artist who created Les Mis felt this. I especially like how Alain Boublil understands Hugo's expression of the divine nature of love in all its aspects. He said to me, Victor Hugo saw religion as a way to link people through a message of love. Sometimes I think there's even a very healthy and healing confusion in the way he speaks of physical love, love between human beings, and a broader love of everyone. That's what attracted Claude Michel and me to the novel. Victor Hugo saw love as a manifestation of God within everyone, believing that love motivates our best selves if we recognize and follow it. Ultimately, Hugo tells us in Les Misérables, love is unsinkable. No matter what you do, you will never destroy that everlasting vestige of the human heart, love.